Wow, that was tremendous. Well, our next speaker is Olivier Melnick. He's become a very close personal friend of mine. I don't know if he wants to claim me, but I'll claim him. And I believe that Olivier has been raised up for such a time as this because his heart is exposing anti-Semitism, the irrational hatred of the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And in case you hadn't noticed, that's on the rise. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
And so God has raised up people like Olivier Melnick of Jewish heritage, who is a believer, to sort of educate us on what's going on in the area of anti-Semitism. One of the tragic things that you're starting to hear more frequently is that the Jews living in the land of Israel are not really Jews. Have you heard that? And they do this to sort of delegitimize Israel's right to the land. I mean, if they're not really Jews, then they don't belong there. So that's part of the anti-Semitic philosophy that's coming our direction. And so Olivier is going to educate us about this. So let's welcome Olivier Melnick.
Good morning, Shabbat Shalom.
Morning.
So I'm gonna have two messages today, and as always, I always bring the good news. What is it?
1, 2, 3, start the clock.
Okay. Good morning. So I always bring you the bad news. The Jews. We're gonna take over the banks. We're gonna take over the world. We're gonna take over everything. And so we're gonna talk about that today. But there's one thing that I think we Jews are kind of good at is connecting and networking with people. We like to talk. We like to, schmooze. And so we always, we like to connect with people. So there's these two Jewish friends, David and Shlomo. And David is, I guess I can't move there. I got a anti-Semitic microphone. So David and Shlomo are getting together, and they always like to kind of, challenge each other. So Shlomo says, "Hey, listen, you want to play the game?" He goes, "Yeah, I want to play the game." So David goes, David Bernstein. He goes, "David, Shlomo, I want you to think of 3 people that you think I don't know, and I'm sure I know them." And he goes, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yeah, okay, all right. First one, Harrison Ford." I goes, "Oh gosh, that's so easy." He calls on the phone. He goes, "Hey, Harry, it's David. Hey, David, how are you doing? Oh, I cannot forget the last time I came to your house. The barbecue was awesome. Let's get together soon." Click. So his friend goes, "So you can do better than that?" He goes, all right. President Trump. He goes, "Really? Okay." "Donald, it's David. David, we're still waiting for you to come back to Mar-a-Lago. When are you going to come for dinner?" Click. So he said, "You got one more chance. One more chance." So Shlomo thinks, and he goes, "Oh, they're 2 Jews, So he goes, "I got it. The Pope." He's thinking, his friend's Jewish, so So he goes, "All right, okay, let's get on a plane. Let's go to Vatican." So they fly to Vatican, and they get there, and it's the time on Sunday morning when the Pope's going to come on the balcony and do the mass and everything. So David says, "Shlomo, you stay in the crowd, and you watch on the balcony. I can't take you with me on that one. You understand? You watch. I will be coming with the Pope on the balcony." Come on. He goes, "Just watch." So Shlomo's waiting, and all of a sudden the Pope comes in, and right next to the Pope, there's a cardinal, and right on the other side, there's David. And Shlomo's looking, he's going like, "Oh my gosh." And then all of a sudden this person next to him goes, "Excuse me, I need your help here. Could you help me?" And Shlomo goes, "Sure. Okay, what do you need? Could you tell me who's the guy in white next to Bernstein?" Okay. All right. So it's who you know. All right. So I want to tell you a little bit about Shalom and Messiah. This is the ministry that we started about a year ago, and it was really started by two people, myself and Doug Gilmore. Raise your hand. Doug is right here. He's my VP of Operation. Make sure you come visit and say hi to Doug at the tables. We basically. As it says on the screen, we exist to expose and fight anti-Semitism, equip and mobilize Christians, and lead Jewish people to the Messiah. That QR code will come back at the end of the presentation. If you want to snap it right now, you can. This is the only time in church that you will hear me say, pull out your phone and use it. But silence it at the same time. That QR code will take you to our website where there's a lot of different things you can get, including the notes for this message and the message for this afternoon. So if you want to get the notes, there's a lot of information. By the way, I think that Bill Federer's presentation has more slides than the entire computer of mine with all my presentations put together. Amazing. We brought some books with us. Most of these are on the back table. So again, make sure you come visit and say hi to us. They're also all on Amazon. We are on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And two different YouTube channels. This one on the screen, which is the Shalom and Messiah Ministries, where we put all the interviews and the teachings and the commentaries, as well as this new series that I started called Fib or Fact. When I ask a question and I respond within 3 to 4 minutes, is it true? Is it not true? And there are great little videos you can send people on topics that are important to address. And by the way, you can always reach me. There's email on all those videos. If you have a question you want me to address, hey, Olivier, would you do a fib or fact on such a topic? Send it to me, and if it's appropriate and if it fits the mission statement of the ministry, we'd love to include that in one of our episodes. Also, there's another website, another YouTube channel, which is the Olivier Melnick's devotional. This is where I put my daily devotional Monday through Friday, 1 minute, 1.5 minute daily devotional on a couple of verses. And you can sign up for all this through that QR code that you will get again at the end of the presentation. And they're also on the book table. We have those QR codes. So if you miss them on the screen, now you have no excuse. You've got to come to the table. I'll do anything to sell a book. Refuting 3 lies against the Jews, 3 conspiracy theories. These are the most used against our people, and we've seen a really a resurgence of those kinds of lies in the last couple of years, a year and a half since October 7, 2023, and those are the theory of the Khazars, the Rothschilds, and the protocols of the elders of Zion. So I'm going to try in the time that I have to cover all those 3. Again, I might skip some slides, but you get all the notes. And when you go back over the notes, if you want to reach out, email, and ask a question, I'm always available, okay? I don't want to just leave you with notes. I want to start a relationship. I want to be a resource. So make sure that you stay connected with us. So the Khazars, who has never heard the word the Khazars? Good. I'm glad I'm here. I mean, it's okay because most people have not, what are the Khazars? What is that? Well, the Khazars, their origins, the country of Khazaria was located between Turkey and Russia in a northern Caucasus region, and they became independent of the Turkic Empire at the beginning of the 7th century. They settled and dominated the area between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, as you see on the map. So what's so unique about the Khazars? Because nobody really know a whole lot about them. They remained independent for about 200 years. Then there was a war, and eventually they became absorbed by Russia. And they kind of really completely disappeared from the map by the middle of the 13th century. The people knew they were part of history, they existed, but they're just like, the Khazars, who's that? Nobody cares. Nobody, it's just like it's this obscure people group. I shouldn't say nobody cares because they're people, but an obscure people group that kind of faded away, like many people group even in biblical days that don't exist anymore. So why are we talking about the Khazars in the context of modern days, 21st century, and in the context of anti-Semitism? Well, it goes back to the king, King Bulan of the Khazars, had a desire to embrace religion. He wanted to get religious. He wanted to get spiritual, and he thought, okay, let me figure out which one I'm going to pick, a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew. So he asked for theologians or leaders to come to his palace, and eventually, after listening to their arguments, he chose Judaism and converted to Judaism and brought with him others within his realm of influence to do likewise. Now, how many? That's a good question. How many actually converted? Now, the fact that King Bulan converted to Judaism is a fact of history. That's not a fib. That's true. How many did he bring with him? Nobody really knows. Some people say his entire kingdom converted. I doubt it. Or somebody said his immediate sphere of influence. We don't know. But people followed suit. They converted to Judaism after King Bulan converted to Judaism. They thought if the king does it, it sounds like a good idea. Now, in and of itself, that was not a big deal. It was like the 8th century, okay? And nobody really made any noise about it. And back then, the internet was in its infancy, so, nothing. No, it could not be in its infancy because Al Gore was not born. Okay, so yeah, so that's, I'm off on my dates. In the 10th century, Spanish scholar Hasdai ibn Shaprut, all of you know exactly who that is, I know, was made aware of the story of the Khazars, and he wanted to send emissaries, messengers, to investigate. And you know what? This is an incredible story. Some people converted to Judaism. We have to see if we can connect with these people. So we sent some people to the area to talk to people, to interview, to meet people. And while they never got to meet with any Khazars, they received, the emissaries received letters from someone known as King Joseph of the Khazars that, of course, nobody met, but they got those letters. The letters were very detailed about the conversion, but they are believed to be hoaxes, forgeries. So far, there's really not a whole lot to validate the story of the Khazars. Forget that the conspiracy theory that the Jews of today are descendants from the Khazars. Right now, we're trying to establish if there's a lot of historical data to prove the existence and the conversions of the Khazars to Judaism. And there's very little, some, but very little. Yehuda Halevi is another Jewish scholar who wrote a book. It's a fictional book, actually, as a novel in the 12th century, a book of argument in defense of a despised religion. Really, basically what he did, he called it the Khuzari, in his, relation to the Khazars. It was a novel. It was fictional, but it was a book to defend the idea that Judaism was the best religion if you pick one. And because of what the Khazars had done a few hundred years prior, or 400 years prior, he thought this would be a good way to use in my research to prove that, hey, if you're going to pick one, we the Jews, we have it right, okay? So he wrote that book, and again, it's part of history, but nobody really paid attention to it that much. So 700 years go by, almost 800 years go by, and we get this modern accusation that comes first in this book known as the 13th Tribe. And this man, Arthur Koestler, advanced the theory that all modern Jews are descendants of the Khazars. I'm a descendant of the Khazars, according to Arthur Koestler, which really is a convenient approach, like Dr. Woods just said, a convenient approach to delegitimizing Israel and the Jewish people's right to the land. If we're not the descendants of the Judean Jews of Israel, then really we're colonizing, we are occupying. So if all modern Jews are descendants of the Khazars, they are not Judean Jews. They are not the legal owners of the land of Israel. They are occupiers, they are colonizers. And then you all of a sudden have a justification for the events of the last, at least the last since 1948, even before that. The trying to push the Jews out of Israel because it's stolen land that really is Palestine, which of course we know is not true. But if we're not the real Jews, then what are we doing there? We're stealing land. So that's the big challenge there. And of course, this started to pick people's interest because it's bringing an argument that, hey, here is another way to get rid of the Jews. And Satan, the inventor of anti-Semitism, is always looking for new ways. So if we can find a new way to get rid of the Jews, let's milk that one until we, as far as we can. And so in his book, Kostler, and I quote, says, "The large majority of surviving Jews in the world is of Eastern European and perhaps mainly of Khazar origin. If so, this would mean that their ancestors came not from the Jordan, but from the Volga, not from Canaan, but from the Caucasus, once believed to be the cradle of the Aryan race, and that genetically they are more closely related to the Hun, Uyghur, and Magyar tribes than to the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And okay, here you go. I am aware, at least he's being honest a little bit. I am aware of the danger that it may be maliciously misinterpreted as a denial of the state of Israel's right to exist, you think. But that right is not, listen, that right is not based on the apathetic origins of the Jewish people. Nor on the mythological covenant of Abraham with God. It is based on international law, i.e., on the United Nations decision in 1947. That was the vote that took place in November of 1947 that led to the May 14, 1948 Declaration of Independence. There's nothing mythological about the Abrahamic covenant, friends. Nothing mythological. It's the word of God, every single word of it. It's the truth. It's exactly like it said. The Abrahamic covenant is foundational to a lot of what we read and what we believe in the Bible. Okay, so we need to pay attention to that covenant. But to him, it's a myth. So and the Jews are the Khazars. Shlomo Sands wrote two books that made him famous: The Invention of Israel and The Invention of the Jewish People. And I think he wrote another one called When I Stopped Being a Jew, or Why I Stopped Being a Jew. I forgot. I haven't really read those books because I got better things to do. But in the 2008 book, The Invention of the Jewish People, Shlomo Sands further validates Kostler's view. He said in the 1970s, Israel was caught up in the momentum of territorial expansion, grabbing land. And without the Old Testament in its hand and the exile of the Jewish people in its memory, it would have no justification for annexing Arab Jerusalem. Already, pushing the agenda. 1970s, it's only about, maybe 7 years after Yasser Arafat was put onto the scene to start promoting the PLO, the Palestinian narrative. So it was new at the time, but it started to take root. Arab Jerusalem and establishing settlements in the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights, and even the Sinai Peninsula. So the theory continues to grow. Now, how do we debunk it? Well, there's several ways. The Khazar theory can be debunked by archaeology. A lot can be debunked by archaeology, and the Bible can be proven true by archaeology in many, many ways. If you don't believe me, make sure you don't miss the two presentation by Dr. Randall Price, who is one of the best archaeologists alive today, who has a tremendous wealth of knowledge. And if he doesn't speak of it from the pulpit, go see him at the table, ask him, he probably knows. Okay, so archaeology, 1896, the discovery of this thing called the Cairo Geniza was one of the greatest Jewish discoveries. It was a storage facility containing some 400,000 medieval Jewish manuscript fragments. and spread out across several locations. Most of them apparently right now are being kept at the University of Cambridge. One fragment is known as the Schechter letter or the Geniza letter. Schechter after this man, Solomon Schechter. So the Khazar theory debunked by archaeology through because of the Cairo Geniza. I'll tell you in a second why. But this is Solomon Schechter studying all the findings in the Cairo Geniza for let's say 400 or 40,000. I forgot. I always forget. 400,000 medieval fragments. To me, this looks also a lot like Pastor Andy Woods when he prepares for a sermon. Doesn't it? Doesn't it? That's his office right there with all the manuscripts, okay? But it gets really good when he's done. Amen? So the Schechter letter or the Geniza letter is only a fragment of the original document, but it differs from the accounts found in the Khazuria or the Hazdai ibn Shaprut letters that I mentioned earlier, in that it claims that Jews from Persia and Armenia fled persecution. Imagine that. Jews fleeing persecution. Never heard of it. And found refuge in Khazaria. They would have been Judean Jews, Jews from Eretz Israel, Jews from the land of Israel, who moved to Khazaria, and not Khazars who converted to Judaism. Did Khazars convert to Judaism? Yes. Yes, that is a true story. Not that many in Jews in Khazaria would have been mostly Judean Jews who fled persecution. And that letter helps prove that. Now, there's a couple of gentlemen I want to mention because this man actually, he's not, he did some research in genetics, and the next guy also, this man's name is, I forgot his name, do I have his name somewhere on the thing? Maybe on the next slide, I don't know. So what he said is, we compared two genetic models for European Jewish ancestry depicting a mixed Khazarian European Middle Eastern and sole Middle Eastern origins. We conclude that the genome of European Jews is a tapestry of ancient populations including Judea's Khazars, okay, converted, Greco-Roman Jews, Mesopotamian Jews, and Judeans, Jews from Israel. And that their population structure was formed in the Caucasus and the banks of the Volga, with roots stretching to Canaan and the banks of the Jordan. So this guy, who's not a friend, he's trying to push he's not saying that Jews are all real Jews from Israel, but he's admitting that it's not a clear-cut decision that they're all Khazar. So he's saying it's a mix, okay? And the expert, whenever you do research on this, it always takes you back to the man who wrote the book, The Jews of Khazaria, Kevin Allen Brooke. And he says in his book, by this analysis, we can show that the dominant ethnic element among Eastern European Jews is Judean, the ancient Jewish people of Judea in the Middle East. So genetics and archaeology can disprove if history is a little blurred, a little vague. Genetics, 2025 genetics and archaeology can disprove the Khazaria theory or conspiracy theory that Jews are not descendants of Khazaria. They're Jews who moved to basically Eastern Europe, and I was born from what we call an Ashkenazi a Jewish family, which is the Eastern European Jews, as opposed to the Middle Eastern Jews, the Sephardic Jews from Spain and North Africa and the Middle East. But we all come from the same place. Now, I do leave you with some questions to ask people who tell you the Jews are all descendants of the Khazars, they're not real Jews. Well, who converted the Khazars? We don't know. There's no record of that. So we know it's a true story. We hope it's a true story, but we really don't know the name of the rabbi or the Jewish theologian we don't know. How many Khazars converted? We don't know. What happened to them? Those who converted, did they started their own little Jewish sect of something? We don't know. There's no writing, there's very, very, very little, except for the couple of things that I mentioned about Ben Shaprut and Judah Halevi. There's very, very little. But here's my favorite one. If we're not the real Jews, why do you want to kill us? I don't get it. Oh, they're not the real Jews. They're imposters. So are we being persecuted for being imposters or for being Jewish? Or that doesn't make any sense. So the Khazar theory really doesn't stand on a whole lot. When people tell you, if somebody comes to you and say, "Hey, the Jews, they're descendants of the Khazars," first question is like, "Okay, explain that to me, because I that's interesting. Explain that to me," and then have them tell you, "Well, let me find the video on YouTube," because that's all they're going to get. And because I can promise you, they did not read Brooke and the other guy. I forgot his name. I had his name on a previous slide. I deleted the slide. That's why I don't have his name. They didn't read the books. They watched a 15-minute video and then watched the video with them and say, "Okay, all right, so let's talk about this." It's going to take time, but when you have a skeptic, if it's somebody you care about, if it's somebody on the street passing by, whatever, you don't have time, I get it. But if it's somebody in your family, and some people come to me all the time, they say, my nephew, my son, my brother-in-law, my father, they believe this. I don't know. I just don't know what to tell them. I don't know how to debunk it. Sit down with them. It's going to take a little time. Watch that video, listen to them, and say, "Okay, let's unpack this. Let's see if it makes sense." At the end, it will not make any sense. So the next one is the Rothschild. We are Jews. We love money. Okay? That's what you hear. That's what people have heard for centuries. You laugh, you know it's a joke, but it's in every joke there's a part of truth. So what's with the Rothschild? Well, when you hear somebody in a conversation discuss any current events, anything serious, and you go, "Well, it's the Rothschild." You know what that means? Money, greed, control, Jews. All those words: money, greed, control, and the Jews and Israel. That's the Rothschild. We're taking over the banks. We're taking over the. So this reminds me of, I was going to move, but this microphone is keeping me. It's kind of like this invisible fence for the dogs. If I go too close to the mic, like, okay, all right. This is scary. These two Jewish friends from the old country sitting on a bench in Brooklyn, and they're poor. They have nothing. They're retired, and they're sitting in Brooklyn, and his friend sits next to him, and he goes, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm reading the paper," and he's looking at the paper, and it's a white supremacist, racist paper. And he looks at him and goes, "What are you reading? What kind of piece of trash are you reading?" He goes, I'm reading the paper. It's called Der Stürmer, which is like a really bad German newspaper from the Nazi Germany. It's a new edition." And I go, why do you read this? I can't believe it. After everything they've done to our people. He goes, "Listen, you and I have nothing. When I read this paper, we own the banks. We own Hollywood. We control the world. I feel good." So there you have it. The Rothschilds, it goes back to the mid-1700s. Mayer Amschel Rothschild was the founder of the banking dynasty. And there's no question that, there is a banking dynasty. There is, handling of money. I mean, we're not going to hide that. That's truth. But let's see what's truth and what's added to it. So he had... He was orphaned at age 12 with 4 siblings to take care of. He became the mom and dad. He became the apprentice to a famous banker, and he became pretty soon, at age 20 or so, he became age 19, the personal dealer in the sense of a financial advisor, not drug dealer, financial advisor to Crown Prince Wilhelm I in 1763. And he began to amass his fortune in 1789, at the time of the French Revolution. And there was a lot of wars going on. And so that's how he started to amass his fortune. He quickly delegated his banking business to his 5 sons across Europe, and that is a little bit of a part of the problem. They became major lenders to various countries during the wars of Napoleon, the early 1800s. And the sons were very spread across Europe, various countries. Germany, France, England, different places in Europe, and they kept moving, and they're involved in helping various countries during the war. And sometimes the sons, they're all getting along, but they found themselves on two sides of a conflict. So it's it was like you had two different sons of the same family doing business and dealing with two sides of a conflict, and you can't be right on both sides. So those were poor decisions. I'll give you that much. They were not the best decisions, but that created some of the conflict within the family and outside. Looking at, look, they're all in it for money. Were they? No, probably not, and we'll get to that in a minute. But those were bad decisions. That's for sure. But let's look a little bit about the history of the name. The Rothschild name became synonymous with wealth and philanthropy. It was not immediately this negative thing. This is Tevye the dairyman from Fiddler on the Roof. You know his famous line, God, I know we're the chosen people, but once in a while, could you choose somebody else? Can I relate to that? It also became a symbol of modern Jewish capitalism. Shalom Aleichem, the man who wrote the original book, the Tevye the Dairyman, which is the title of the book that the Fiddler on the Roof came from. He also wrote the song, and in the song in Yiddish, the Jewish dialect made of Hebrew and German, in the song it says, "If I were a rich man," the song as we know it, as we hear it on the play, on the movie, but actually it's in Yiddish is "Wenn ich bin Rothschild," if I were a Rothschild. So that's the original song, because back then it was nobody really saw this as a negative thing. But then, even though prior to that the anti-Semites had started to provide the world with a lot of cartoons depicting how nasty those Jews are with money. So it started, there's one in 1830, so 1780 something is when the Rothschild family started. So 50 years after that it started. The 11th commandment, depicted as Jewish men, that most people think is supposed to be the Rothschild father: get all you can get, keep what you get, and give away nothing. In other words, greed. And I'll tell you in a minute why the original Jewish greed comes from. I've shared that from the pulpit here before, but it's worth repeating. In 1845, the cartoon General Pump, this is German, so I probably don't say it right. I should probably ask somebody to tell me how to say it in German, but General Pump, or Pump, depicted Mayor Amschel Rothschild as a mean-looking gold dispenser to world banker, at the same time taking advantage of the little people. So the Rothschild are getting their reputation drawn all over the world on cartoon. 1898, this is Rothschild. It's a cartoon called Rothschild, and it's got this Rothschild leader as a demon holding the world. And it's interesting. I just noticed that in the center of his hands is France. I don't know how I feel about that. Okay, so then you have a series of magazines from the Museum of Horrors from France that drew a bunch of Rothschild family members as animals. This one is Charlotte Mayer Rothschild as a monkey, the Baron Alphonse as an animal with big claws counting money, the Nathan Mayer Rothschild, at the origin of billions is called here in the magazine. And this is, I don't know if I have it next. No, I'll talk about it in a couple of slides. He was accused of making a lot of money during the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo in Belgium in 1815. So all these guys are like getting into money. And of course, it stopped. It never, we haven't seen it recently at all. Oh, wait, I'm wrong. This is a 21st century cartoon. So the Rothschild are like, banking, no pun intended, banking on the old image of the sons being on two sides of a conflict. Today's anti-Semites are saying, hey, they don't care. If the money's there, they'll finance it. They'll get their pound of flesh. So the Rothschild, interesting that they chose a pig because, pigs are kosher animals. Oh, by the way, okay, I have to say it. There is a way to make a pig kosher. You circumcise the pig. But it's complicated. So here's a 21st century cartoon of a pig feeding piglets as a multinational banking controlled by the Rothschild family. And so the Rothschilds are financing England or Great Britain, ISIS, Al Qaeda, the CIA, Israel, and Boko Haram. And you could probably update that cartoon, adding a couple more piglets with Hamas and Hezbollah, and nobody would say anything. Nobody who would agree with this cartoon would have an issue. Okay, so where is the problem coming from? During the Middle Ages, Jewish people, and some of you have heard me say that before. During the Middle Ages, Jewish people saw their rights dwindle to nothing, and they could not own property. They could not own slaves, which was a common thing back then. They could not be part of a guild. They could not be part of they could not become civil servants. They basically more and more taken away from them, and they could make a living. There was nothing left. One thing that they found out they could do, the Jewish community, is be money lenders, because according to back then the church, the Catholic Church, a Christian could not borrow money from another Christian. That's not biblical. That's not good. Can we borrow from Jews or from non-Christians? Sure, whatever. So Jewish people started to become money lenders, and it started slow and small, but eventually it became a lucrative business. And when it became a lucrative business, the leaders of Europe went like, wait a minute, those Jews figured out a way. So what they did is they taxed the Jewish people lending money to the Christians and to the non-Jews, but they would tax our people a little more than the profit they would make from the loan they would give. So the Jewish people would still doing it, but they would lose money, so they have to raise their interest rate. And it went on for a while where the Jewish people ended up raising the interest rate several times, and that's how the myth of the greedy Jew became what it is today. Are we good with money? Thank you. I feel like now would be a good time to take an offering. Okay, no, never mind. Are we good? Are we good with money? This is called being shrewd, being smart with money, good investors, good using money in a good way. Yes, Jewish people, not all of them. You don't want to paint with broad strokes, but there are a lot of good Jewish people that are shrewd and smart investors and users of money. Does that mean that we're greedy? Not necessarily. I'll circle back to that at the end of the Rothschild in a few slides. But the myth lives on. In 1944, you look at, you go back to the war. Now you're looking, after the Napoleonic wars and all those things. You have to move forward. 1944, Italian cartoon depicting Jewish bankers carrying money bags past dead soldiers. Like, hey, if we can make money, it doesn't matter how many people get killed. So there's a bloodbath. It doesn't matter. We're just gonna we're making our money here. And 2010, it's a Polish art on wood. This is a little piece of wood about that big. I almost brought it with me because I bought it in Krakow in 2010 on the marketplace, like a little city farmers market. They sell those. On the bottom right of that little plaque, you see a little coin. It looks like a penny. It's glued on the wood, on the image. It's a Jew counting his money, and that little penny on it is a good luck charm. You put this in your house, and you'll be wealthy. So this is the the money counting Jew good luck charm that you can buy in Poland to this day. Okay, so it continues. It continues to be propagated, that the lie of the Jews and the money. Of course, the book The International Jew, which we'll get back to when I talk about the Protocols of Zion in the next section, was published by Henry Ford in 1920. And financial leadership of the Rothschild family was seen by Ford as the epitome of the Jewish financial world. To Henry Ford, the Rothschild family became the symbol of Jewish banking control. So Ford was a really, really strong anti-Semite, and he's the only American civilian who received a Nazi medal from Hitler. The highest honor from the Nazi party to a civilian outside of Germany was received by Henry Ford. And it is believed that Hitler had a picture of Henry Ford on his desk. I drive a Ford. I drive a Ford. What am I saying here? It's been 105 years. Okay? We cannot hold the grandparents and the great grandparents responsible for what the people do today. It's the same with the Nazis. It's the same with, so we got to be careful. Do your research, but it's part of history. You don't want to ignore it. And it's in the notes. I'm going to not read this. Okay. Possible reasons for the Rothschilds' Greek theory. Why would people say that the Rothschilds are controlling? And some of the reasons. The Battle of Waterloo. Nathan Rothschild rushed to the coast of Belgium through the English Channel at a very high price. Arrived in London a day before the news of Napoleon's defeat. And the story goes on claiming that Rothschild profit from Waterloo, from the defeat of Napoleon, was 135 million pounds. That's back then a tremendous amount of money. Story was a hoax because it is proven by history that Nathan Rothschild was nowhere near the Waterloo region at that time. But even back then, nobody checked facts, because if you want a story to be true, you'll believe it to be true because it fits your need for that story, for that agenda. Another possible reason is William Marr. William Marr is the man who coined the word anti-Semitism, antisemitismus, in 1879. First time it's ever written in a book. I mean, anti-Semitism, to be sure, goes back to biblical days, but the word itself comes in 1879. He had worked with a family close to the Rothschild and had been turned down for a job promotion that was given to a less deserving Jew. So in one of his memoirs, he recalled that the Goy, the Gentile, the Goy had to bear the consequences of the economic crisis. Edmund Rothschild was also a possible reason why people got really upset with the Rothschild, because he was his nickname was the known benefactor. He purchased over 125,000 acres in Palestine. Back then it was called Palestine. You've heard me on that. You know what I mean by that. The landmass called Palestine before 1948. This massive land purchases gave credence to the anti-Semitic claims that Jews control the banks and want to control the world and buy everything. Okay? But here's an interesting word in this whole thing. Purchased. He purchased land that was swamp and desert land with nothing on it at the price of fertile land in America. High price. Not stolen, purchased. Somebody got money for it. It was not stolen. Lionel Walter Rothschild served on the Zionist Federation, and it was to this very Lord Rothschild that Lord Balfour addressed his short but powerful 1917 letter known as the Balfour Declaration, which was instrumental in the process of the rebirth of Israel as we know it today. So that got people upset. See, the Rothschild, they'll go talk to it really, we are Jewish people. We are really, really gifted at connection. Networking. I personally enjoy that very much. I love networking, and not only Jews, but that's one thing that we like to do. So there was jealousy. Very often, anti-Semitism is connected to jealousy. Something happens, and it's really is human nature. So the greedy Jew, old habits die hard. The Rothschilds were very rich and influential, and most likely not squeaky clean. I'm sure they made some mistakes. Bad decisions, bad choices. When they use poor judgment, or sometimes they even use greed. But here is what you need to remember. If you remember one thing, when you talk to your your friend who's saying, like, it's the Rothschild, it's the Jews, they control the money. If a Jewish person is greedy, they're greedy because they're a fallen person first, who happens to be ethnically Jewish. And they ask your friend, do you know of any greedy Gentiles? And you will have to say, he or she will have to say, well, yes. So why do we never point the finger and say, oh, they're Gentiles, they're so greedy, they want to control everything? Why is that? Because there's another agenda behind it. It's the destruction of the Jews. It's the delegitimizing of the Jews and of Israel. So the irrational claim that their greed, desire to control the banks in the world would be based on their Jewish roots is no more valid a claim than a claim that all Germans are Nazis or all Muslims are terrorists. Close one on that last one, but we don't want to paint with broad strokes. But to say that all Germans are Nazis, my mother, who lost her dad in the Holocaust, in Auschwitz, could not step foot in Germany, she didn't like to buy German stuff, and she did not like the Germans. She just, she was 15 when her dad was taken by the Gestapo. She never recovered. So she did paint with broad stroke when it came to that, but she had experienced something that I have not experienced. Okay? But we should not paint with broad strokes. Not all Germans were Nazis, not all Muslims are terrorists, and not all Frenchmen are rude. Okay? Well, jury's still out on the last one. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I got 10 minutes left, so you're going to have to listen faster. But remember, you're getting the notes. Okay, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is a booklet that is probably, if you're gonna name one bestseller, the best booklet that has done the most damage against the Jews in the history in the last 125 years, that's the one. It was created from plagiarism from two different books from the late 1800s and early 1900s, and it's in the notes. It's not important. The current version of the Protocols was first published in 1905, so 120 years ago. It's not that old, as it was originally written as the final chapter of a book written on the Antichrist by Russian mystic Sergei Nilus. He claimed that they were the minutes from the first Zionist Congress that took place in Switzerland, in Basel, Switzerland in 1897. Okay? Keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to get back to the minutes. The minutes. Why the minutes? Because when you think of board meeting minutes, you think of what? Precision. I mean, I go to board meetings all the time, and, did we discuss this? Well, let's go back to the minutes. Well, yes, Olivier said that, every word. The minutes are, the purpose of the minutes is to bring you back to the details of a conversation you had, yesterday, a week ago, a year ago, 10 years ago. Those are the minutes of the meeting. So this was claimed that they were the minutes from the first Zionist Congress. They were translated in German in 1919, and after that, many other languages followed. Jewish leaders are accused of plotting to take over government, banks, business, education, religion, and more. Okay? When I started looking at this, I started thinking, wait a minute, this makes me think of something here. Maybe there's something. Taking over government, banks, business, education, religion, and more. This big lie made me think of the big deception. What I mean by that is what is known as the Seven Mountains of Influence of the New Apostolic Reformation, NAR, which claims that, family, religion, education, media, arts and entertainment, business and government are to be controlled by the church. It's also known as dominionism or kingdom now theology. Okay? So it's not okay for the Jews to try to do it, but we should do it as a church. I don't believe the church should be into this. Okay? I don't support NAR. It's supporting a kingdom now theology. Kingdoms need king. Okay? The king is not returned yet. When he returns, he will reign from Jerusalem on the throne of David, and that's what's going to happen. Until then, we have to be patient. We have to build his kingdom, bring souls in preparation for the kingdom into salvation, get people saved for when the kingdom is inaugurated, when? At the end of the tribulation. Amen? Are we still pre-trib here? Okay, good. Just checking. But why is this? I don't get this. It's okay to we criticize the Jews for trying to do something which really we're not trying to do, but then the church is by some praised for trying to do the same thing. It looks similar to me, so that's to me very dangerous. It was just a little parallel here. The spreading of the protocols, 1920s, for about a year and a half. The protocols were also published by Henry Ford. As I mentioned, is International Jew. The Dearborn Independent was a newspaper that he was publishing, and it was there, but he had to apologize after, I think, about a year and a half, because he was sued and for libel, and he had to backpedal and say, okay, you know what? I take it back. This was not true. But it had already been debunked as a hoax, but it didn't matter. 1938, for 75th birthday, Ford received the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, the highest Nazi award to a foreigner created by Hitler. Here's a picture. That's Henry Ford in the middle. 1925, they were republished in Middle East by King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. They were first published in 25, and they were republished for the Muslim world in 1970. That's the picture right there. One of the many covers, Jewish conspiracy, same theme. Can you back up the clock another 10 minutes? Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser produced a booklet based on the protocols. So that's another cover, the very famous tentacles of the Jewish monster taking over the world. They've been exposed as a forgery since the late 1920s. 1936, Hugo Valentin, in his book Anti-Semitism, characterized the protocols as the greatest forgery of the century in 1936, only 30 years after they were first published. Then Father Pierre Charles, professor of theology at the Jesuit College in Louvain, France, said it has been proved that these protocols are a fraud, a clumsy plagiarism made for the purpose of rendering the Jews odious. 1964, the Senate Judiciary Committee issued a report repudiating the protocols. Every age and country has had its share of fabricated historic documents which have been foisted on an unsuspecting public for some malign purpose. One of the most notorious and most durable of these is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. But my favorite is there's a man, his name is Benjamin Siegel. That sounds Jewish. According to him, in A Lie and a Libel, to bring into harmony all the various contradictory assertions, there is only one thing left for us to do. We must accept all of them as true. Just as Homer was said to have been born in 7 Greek cities simultaneously, so Nihilus translated the protocols from the French and the Hebrew simultaneously. But then he continues, and all the things that we know from history about the protocols. They were stolen by a noble woman of Chernigov from a high Masonic dignitary, and at the same time by the dignitary's wife or lover. This lady gave it to Nihilus's friend Shukotin, who simultaneously appropriated it from an extensive book of protocols or lectures notes that he found hidden in an iron. They originated at the Basel Zionist Congress in 1897, and at the same time in lecture notes in Paris students. In a chest at a Zionist headquarters in France, but also in Alsace, eastern France, and in Switzerland, simultaneously. They were also stolen from a Herzl's house in Vienna and the secret vault of the Mitzrayim Lodge. They were delivered to Nihilus in 1897 by a Russian spy, and equally by Sukhotin in 1901. At the same time, the French translation of a Hebrew original was sent from Paris by Rashovsky to the Russian Interior Ministry in 1897 and then delivered to Nihilus. We have no idea where they're coming. I mean, it's just like they're mysterious. That's their weakness. In the entire protocols, nobody ever knows the identity or location of the most powerful man on earth. the supreme leader of the elders of Zion. Sounds like Emperor Palpatine. The supreme leader of the elders of Zion. Nobody knows where he's from, his identity, where he lives. Yet, this is coming from the minutes, remember, of the first Zionist Congress, where you would have the name of all the attendees and their age and their position and their all those details. None of that. Also, in forging the document, for sake of time, I'm just going to mention that. I'm not going to read it. In forging the document, they mention something about the Panama Canal, and there was a 2 years discrepancy in the fact that they were 2 years early. I mean, it could have not happened, so they were not paying attention. And when you do forgery, very often you can easily debunk a hoax when you look at dates and people, And it's like the quote that you see, don't believe every quote you read on the internet, signed Abraham Lincoln. That's the idea. So let me wrap this up in the 1 minute I have left. They are irrational. All the scriptures are there, so you can read them on your own. They're irrational because they come from Satan. This whole thing about getting rid of the Jews. He has the ability and the desire to make the irrational look and sound rational. You'll hear more about this, and I'll develop this further in this afternoon's session on what I'm going to be doing this afternoon. So you don't want to miss that one. I'll be there. We cannot fight anti-Semitism if we do not understand that we are in a spiritual battle, friends. We are in a spiritual battle. It's all part of Satan's desire to turn the world against the Jews and the Jews against Yeshua. That's what he's trying to do. And so he's behind it. And again, I'm going to develop that this afternoon. So consider this the introduction. Satan will fail. You know what? I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and we're going to say it together. 1, 2, 3. Satan will fail. I like that. That was good. So pray regularly against the father of lies. Provide others with the truth. Preparing to rescue and shelter our Jewish friends. I talked about it last year. I'm going to talk more about it at the end of session 2 this afternoon. Really, don't miss it. It's important. The time is now, friend. The time is now. I give you all the information if you want to read the books for yourself. And here is your last chance to snap this for the notes. God bless you.